How old do you think is India?
Genetic history of India is 70,000 years old. The archaeological record with unbroken cultural continuity is 10,000 years old. And we have not even scratched the surface of our archaeology. When the Greeks came to India during the modern times, 2,500 years ago, they spoke about the fact, they have recorded the fact that the Indians had a calendar system that dated back to 6,600 something BC.
The idea of India did not exist before the British. The British gave us India. Why do you think they say?
So India was not born in 1947. Lots of people try to portray it that way.
Why do you think we should talk about the invasions?
The Israelis make sure that their kids are taught what happened in the Holocaust. The Chinese speak about the century of humiliation. They make it a point to teach their kids what happened. And that's how they're able to go past it.
Don't you think this brushing under the carpet has created more problems?
We have great universities all across India. Nalanda, Takshashila, Tilhara, Vikramashila, Odantapuri, Somapur, Sharda Peeth, so many. Which one is there today?
Namaste dosto. So today's podcast is with a legend in the Indian podcasting space, Mr. Abhijit Chavda. He is a powerhouse of knowledge with topics ranging from history, archaeology, science, geopolitics, you name it. So we asked him about the past, the present and the future of Bharat. But this entire podcast, this entire conversation is divided into two parts. This is part one of it. One note for the video viewers of this podcast that this podcast was recorded a few months ago and I have lost around 13 kgs. So I may look a little different in this particular podcast. Anyway, let's start the conversation. I had asked you this question long back when we met for the first time, but I want you to clarify it for the people as well, that why do you make videos on YouTube? I asked this question to everybody that why? Because I have this question that why do I make videos? Why do you make videos?
So I always thought of myself as a writer. I was never a speaker. I was always the quiet guy. I was always not really an introvert, but I would stay quiet. That's how I used to be. And then I made one video because it was a question, a topic that nobody had ever explored. Why Genghis Khan refused to invade India. And I looked for this information all over the internet. Nobody had ever done this. So that's why I wrote an article about this. And then I thought, let's make a video as well. So I made a video and it just blew up. I mean, I had one video on the channel. It's reached 1 million in like 5 days. So that's kind of the kind of thing that happened. Then I was invited to various podcasts and those videos kind of blew up. So it seemed to me that people actually want to hear what I have to say. So I thought, okay, let's try it out. Let's try and give them what they want. And that's how the YouTube channel took off. So that's why I do it. I think that I have some knowledge that is worth sharing. I've always been a bookworm, thirsty for knowledge. I've been studying history and science and various things since I was a kid, since I was less than 10 years old. And I've absorbed a lot of knowledge and information. And I find it fascinating. I'm sharing what I find interesting. I don't talk about things I don't like, things I find boring. So that's what I do. Whatever I find interesting, I speak about that. And it seems to resonate with the audience. And I'm very grateful to have an audience that actually watches me. So that's why I make videos on YouTube.
We are one of those people who watch your videos.
Thank you so much.
And we love watching them, especially because it's just fascinating for me that the range of questions that you get in Ask Abhijit and how can you be so ready and still be so eloquent about it? Because the way we make videos is completely different from your way of making videos. For example, we script everything to the T. We know every line that we are going to say in front of the camera, and majority of our work happens before we come in front of the camera.
Yes.
Now, of course, majority of your work has been happening over the ages. As you said that you used to love reading since you were 10. So my question to you is, how do you remember all these things that you have read and how does it come out so quickly, and how do you train your brain to do that?
How do I remember things? I remember things because I give myself the permission to forget everything. So when I take a book, I don't tell myself I have to read the entire book. I'll read a few pages. If it catches my imagination or if it catches my attention, then I will read it. And even if I read an entire book, I give myself the permission to forget 95% of it if I find it boring. So that way I only remember what I find fascinating, what I find interesting. I've read entire books that I don't remember. And I've read some books like when I was 7 years old that I still remember every page of it. So it's about what I find interesting. And if you see, you watch movies, right? We all watch movies. Some movies, the next day we forget what the story was. And some movies you will not forget for decades. So whatever is interesting, I remember. I have a lot of interests. I'm interested in science, in history, geopolitics, culture, travel, cuisine, sport, all kinds of stuff. So whatever I find interesting, I don't forget that. And I only talk about those things. And yeah, I get a very wide range of questions from all kinds of different topics. I pick what I can deal with. I don't take everything.
Very interesting. That's very interesting. So that sort of editing does happen. So there are things that Mr. Abhijit does not know about as well.
Of course. I mean, come on. There is, I know very little. I know there's so little that I know. The more you read, the more you learn, the more you realize that you know nothing about the universe.
Dunning-Kruger.
Dunning-Kruger.
So again, now continuation to what you said, is this something that you had as a skill since childhood? Did you develop it consciously? How did you develop this skill of just understanding what you like and what you dislike? Because I'll just share my experience that I started reading quite late in my life. She started reading quite early. I started reading quite late in my life. Probably I think the first book that I completely finished was in 9th standard, and it was, I mean, outside of my textbooks. And it was an autobiography by Sunil Gavaskar in Marathi. Okay. So I completed it because I had to read something as an assignment. And then later on in college, I developed this habit of reading. So if you were reading since childhood, did you have this habit? Did you nurture it consciously? How did it happen?
I think you're just born with certain things. Some people are just good at something or the other. I happen to be good at reading, I suppose. I was curious about stuff. I like two things. I liked sports and I liked the library. So the sports field, it saved me from becoming a complete nerd. And the library, I mean, you know, in summer vacations and all, I used to go to the library and spend from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. in the library.
Oh,
And there's so much stuff out there to read. So it's something that was innate in me. It's not like I had to train myself to read. I was always good at that, and I always enjoyed that. So that's why I've been reading so much.
Okay. I have a follow-up question to that. What sport did you play? Since you mentioned sport.
Yeah, so when I was in Europe, in Switzerland, I used to play football because that's what everybody played.
Yeah, sure.
In India, nobody played football, so I had to play cricket. And I came into India a little late, so nobody would give you the bat, and I did not know how to bat. So I had to bowl. And then I also played volleyball. I was good at volleyball. I was good at strength sports, you know, like I never really wrestled or played kabaddi, but I was good at it. In kabaddi, I was good in defense. I catch you once, you won't go.
Right.
That sort of thing. So I actually like all sports, you know. I really enjoy the physical aspect of sports.
So, okay, were you this tall when you were a child?
I was always the tall kid.
You were always a tall kid?
Yeah.
Interesting. So did you have that physical advantage when you were playing volleyball and kabaddi? Because I am also a volleyball
He also
player.
played volleyball.
Oh, you were a volleyball player?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have played for, I mean, I have not played for the state. I have reached the state level in volleyball.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're tall in volleyball, it certainly gives an advantage. I had this service, you know, the side swinging service. It used to travel like that in a curved shape. And when I was like 11 years old, I used to ace the serve with adults and all that. So I always had a certain advantage because of the height. That's for sure. That helps.
So basically,
That's
he was
the
a genius.
only-
Like basically, he was a genius in everything. Like from the time he was a child, like acing sports, reading so much.
So moving on, let's talk about India, because that's something which is very common. People love you for your views about India, and I personally love watching your videos because they don't come only from an emotional standpoint. I mean, there are a lot of people in India who will love the country so much that all of their arguments are based on emotion. But it falls flat at some place. When you are only referring to something through emotion, it falls flat because there will be people who will not be able to relate to it. But when you speak from hardcore facts and when it comes from knowledge, it comes from authority because knowledge is power. So let's talk about India. First, we will start talking about the history of India. Then we will talk about what's happening in today's India. And then we will talk about the future of India. Is it even possible to imagine India as, let's not say superpower, but at least having a seat at the table, like being considered as something important, whether it's possible or it's just in fiction, it's just jingoism.
So a lot of times people think that a lot of Indian history is not history, it's mythology. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even I grew up believing that much of this is mythology. The Ramayana, the Mahabharata, it's all stories and all that stuff. Thousands of years ago, all this happened. So yeah, that's the perception that most people have. These are myths.
Yeah.
So how do we figure out whether it's a myth, what is a myth and what is not? So clearly, if you say that somebody had 10 heads, it's clearly an exaggeration that you had 10 heads. If you say that you had flying vehicles, well, show me evidence of that, then we will believe it. Believe it. It has to be based on data. It has to be based on hard empirical evidence. So when it comes to, let's talk about the Ramayana first. How do we determine whether it's true or it's just myths? So if you read the text of the Ramayana, there are so many place names, geographical place names that still exist. Okay, there is Ayodhya, it still exists. There is Lanka, which still exists. There are various forests, there are various geographical and topological features of the subcontinent which still exist. There are various rivers that are mentioned that still exist. So that is what you would call circumstantial evidence. Okay, fine. So maybe somebody saw the geography of India and wrote a story based on that. You could claim that. So how do we determine whether it really happened? So you would need hard archaeological evidence of something that has to be there. So one such example is the Rama Setu. There is the question of the bridge. And if you look at the satellite data, satellite imagery, there seems to be a bridge over there. Now the question is it a natural bridge or a man-made bridge? So various archaeologists have claimed that it's a man-made bridge, but we would still like to see hard evidence, scientific evidence, research papers that show that, yeah, there is archaeological evidence that this was artificially created. Thus far, we have had 2 US universities, American universities, that have made the claim on video that this is man-made. But they have not come out with any research papers thus far. Now, the ASI, the Archaeological Survey of India, is in, I believe it's the investigation would have begun by now, hopefully. So there was a project that was announced a couple of years ago that they're going to investigate the structure. So once that data comes out, then we will know for sure. So you need hard archaeological evidence to be sure that something actually happened. There are various places in Sri Lanka where Lady Sita was kept a prisoner and all that. So all these places are there, but it still kind of eludes us, the smoking gun kind of evidence. So I think the Rama Setu, once it is properly investigated, will be the smoking gun. When it comes to the Mahabharata, there was a story in the Mahabharata that Arjun went to Dwarka and he witnessed a massive earthquake that happened and the entire city of Dwarka slides under the water. And for more than a century, people claim this is a myth after the 20th century, 21st century. And then I think around 20 or 30 years ago, the archaeologist S.R. Rao actually decided, let's take a look at what's out there off the coast of Dwarka. And over there, there's an entire submerged city. So this is a smoking gun. This can be nothing else except what was written in the Mahabharata, that over there you will find a submerged city. It's there. So that conclusively proves that the Mahabharata actually happened. They've carbon dated some pieces of wood from there that's about 7,800 years old. There are other cities in the Gulf of Khambat near Dwarka that are 11, 12,000 years old. It's an entire complex of cities, not just one city. It's underwater, about 100 or 120 meters below the ocean. So the last time it was above the ocean was about 12,000 years ago. Or 9,000, whatever the thing is. So that tells you how ancient our civilization is. And what was written in the Mahabharata actually happened. We are waiting for the same kind of evidence from the Ramayana, the ASI. If they do the job, then we will know soon. So that's how we determine whether these are myths or not. Clearly, the Mahabharata is not a myth. The evidence of Dwarka proves it's not a myth. So once we have the data from the Ram Setu, we'll be able to say for sure. I am convinced the Ramayana and the Mahabharata actually happened. Mahabharata is proven. Ramayana, we're still waiting for the evidence. But once we have it, it's going to tell us what it is.
No, but just in case, suppose, I always wondered that some things that are so crucial to our existence, why was there such a delay in the investigations? Probably are the people scared that if there is a 1% chance that the evidence comes otherwise, that if they are unable to prove that this was a man-made structure, then what sort of impact will it have on the thousands of people, millions of people who believe that Ramayana is real?
Yeah, see, let's say we investigate the Rama Setu. Our guys, archaeological guys, ASI guys and girls, they go there, they do their investigation and they find nothing. So what does it mean? It means there is an absence of evidence of a man-made structure there. Well, like I keep saying, the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence.
True.
Right? I mean, we are looking at the universe out there. We know that we are able to see only 5% of the universe. 95% of it is dark matter, dark energy. Something is out there. Just because we aren't intelligent enough and don't have the equipment to figure out what it is, doesn't mean it's not out there. Similarly, when it comes to archaeological evidence, we may not be doing a good job. Maybe our archaeologists are not well trained. Maybe they're looking in the wrong place. Maybe they are destroying evidence without knowing that they're doing it. There are lots of possibilities and options out there. So let's say hypothetically these guys go out there and claim that there is no evidence of this being a man-made structure. It doesn't mean it's not a man-made structure. It doesn't mean this never happened. It means we need to look in a better way. So if this sort of absence is discovered, it doesn't mean that people should lose their faith. Right? That's the thing.
So a lot of times what happens is religion and science, these two things are like husband and wife. Okay, they are together, but they don't talk to each other. So science is based on skepticism. Science is based on whatever can be tested in a laboratory is worth giving your attention. Everything else is Occam's razor. Like by Occam's razor, you just eliminate everything that you cannot test in a laboratory. It's not worth my time. And religion is based on faith. If something is real for you, then there is a scope of existence. Like if you believe in something, then it may be subjective truth, whereas science believes in objective truth, universal truth. So that is where the conflict will always be there. Whether we are able to prove that Ram Setu existed, just the way you said that this is circumstantial evidence. Similarly, even in Ramayana, there are constellations which you can date back and figure out that this happened exactly at this point of time. And these details, so the people who are skeptics, even if we are able to prove that Ram Setu is a man-made structure, they will find something which is unreal, say Ravan having 10 heads, or flying vehicles, or Hanuman just flying across the Indian Ocean and just going to Lanka and just burning Lanka, which is just not possible. So there will always be people who will either believe it blindly or not believe it. So do you think it's worth investing our time and effort into something which may or may not give any sort of results?
I think it's always worthwhile to go and investigate your past, your heritage. There's always going to be people who don't believe it. Well, it's not our job to convince them. I don't even want to convince anyone. Believe, you feel free to believe whatever you want to believe. If you don't think it's real, then it's your choice. Live your life, be happy, live and let live. But I think as a civilization, we are not a nation state, we are a civilization state. It's much deeper than that. And for that, it is extremely crucial for us to stay grounded in our culture and try and investigate more. It is a source of national pride, civilizational pride. Why are the Romans, people of Italy, so proud of their culture? Because they have all this evidence of their past. Why are the people of Greece so proud of their culture despite all being converted to Christianity? There's nobody who practices the old pagan religion there, and still they have so much pride. So this is a source of being connected to your past, to your ancestors. And it's something that keeps you grounded. It's something that gives you a moral and ethical and civilizational framework. And that's why it is important that we keep on doing this. There are lots of people who will not believe it. That's fine. It is their choice. And that's how it should be. You spoke about science and religion being on two different sides of the coin. Well, science and religion cannot mix. There are scientists who are atheists. There are scientists who believe in God. And both practice the same profession. So everybody's going to have a different outlook and worldview. Science and religion are fundamentally different. In science, you have empirical observational evidence. A scientific theory has to be falsifiable. If I claim that there is a Hawking's pressure cooker circling the sun outside the orbit of Pluto, it's a theory, yeah, sure, but you can't falsify it or prove it. So that is not science, that is philosophy. Similarly, in science, you have observational evidence and you have physical objects. In philosophy, you also have theories that are logical, but you have non-physical objects like the soul, like God. These are not physical measurable objects. So when something has such aspects, it's not science, it's philosophy, and the two cannot mix. When it comes to religion, there is philosophy plus faith as well. So I don't see any way that these things can mix. It is wrong for people who are in the realm of philosophy or religion to try and intrude into the realm of science. And it is wrong for scientists to try and pass judgment on religion or philosophy, because these domains are completely separate. They're impermeable. That's how I see it.
All right. So we kind of established, we started our conversation with something that was 11,000 years old, 7,000 years old. We'll move a little further to Ayurveda. So I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on Ayurveda? Because I follow an account on Twitter that calls Ayurveda pseudoscience. So because personally, I've had a good experience with Ayurveda because I used to have a lot of heat boils when I was young, and I had a lot of them like when I was in school in summer vacation, and no medicine would cure it. Even the topical creams that I would put, nothing would cure it. But then I went to an Ayurvedic clinic to figure out and to get rid of it once and for all, and I didn't continue my full treatment. I did it and stopped it midway, but still I have never had a problem like that afterwards. I may get a heat boil or something, but it's not as bad. It never actually it'll come and then it'll go. So it's never a problem. It goes by itself for some reason. But then still there are a lot of people, including the person I mentioned, who will not believe in Ayurveda and call it pseudoscience. So just wanted to know your thoughts.
Right. Ayurveda is sometimes a controversial topic, and lots of doctors, lots of specialists, especially from the allopathic field, will call it pseudoscience. So, what is Ayurveda? It's an ancient system of medicine. It's something that's been around it's something that came out of India, out of our culture and civilization. It's been around for thousands of years. And see, in allopathic medicine, we have these user trials, drug trials, all that. So they take, let's say, 2,000 people and they test something on that. They first do it on animals, then they do it on people, and then they do the double-blind testing and all that stuff, and they figure out whether it's right or not. They in allopathic medicine, you usually have compounds, chemical compounds, and things like that. In Ayurveda, you have herbal and natural compounds. So in allopathy, they do these user trials, 2,000, 5,000 people, 10,000 people sometimes. Ayurveda has been tested for thousands of years. So the user trial is done. Okay. The thing is, we don't have a proper, as far as I know, codified system of texts of Ayurveda. Because 1,000 years ago, all our universities and libraries were destroyed. So we lost all the texts. So whatever we still have of Ayurveda was typically passed down from generation to generation by word of mouth and sometimes in writing. So Ayurveda is, I think it's not rigorously codified the way other stuff is. So that is why some people would want to call it pseudoscience. And I am sure there are certain Ayurvedic practitioners who may not be doing it properly. So these issues may exist, but it's probably the most ancient system of medicine in the world. It's all natural and herbal medicine. Let me give you an example from Chinese medicine, Chinese traditional medicine. The Chinese also have something similar to Ayurveda. It's herbs and animal products and things like that. They use rhinoceros horns and tiger claws and God knows what else. But they also have lots of herbs. So we know this terrible illness called malaria, right?
Yeah.
There was this lady, a Chinese traditional medicine practitioner, who identified a herb, and she said that it cures malaria. And then user trials, it was investigated, and the active compound was isolated and extracted from that. It's called artemisinin. It's possibly the most effective drug against malaria today. It came out of Chinese herbal medicine, traditional medicine. I can assure you there will be thousands of remedies that exist within Ayurveda, but the problem is that it's not being tested and looked into rigorously. Because this attitude persists that it's all pseudoscience. Maybe a few instances may exist where some Ayurvedic practitioner did something wrong and maybe ruined someone's liver or kidneys. It doesn't mean everybody is that way. It doesn't mean the entire discipline is wrong. So this is, I would say it's kind of a narrow-minded approach. One needs to be more open-minded. I'm not saying randomly test anything on anyone. Do it properly, do it scientifically. So I think Ayurveda has a huge amount of promise. It's our civilizational heritage. It's worked for thousands of years. And some people will have these attitudes. I don't care. That's okay. I think it's something that's very valuable and really worth looking into, worth investigating properly.
Okay. You said that our ancient texts were destroyed. Also, our culture was an oral culture. So we thought that smriti is, memorization is a sense of pride. Only the person who is worthy, just the way Thor is worthy of wielding that hammer, we considered our knowledge to be that sort of a hammer. So if you are worthy of memorizing it, then you are worthy of understanding this wisdom, this knowledge, and passing it down to the next generation. So we were a civilization that believed in that. But do you think this is biting us back? Do you think that us being an oral civilization that has been passed down verbally is harming our growth? Because a lot of debates, a lot of say arguments happen that where is the proof? Because the West believes in written proof. And whenever we are referring to some historian's work, uh, how do we, because a lot of history has happened in the past. Nobody can do primary research. Nobody can go and ask Aurangzeb what your exact motivations were. So everybody is depending on somebody's opinion of something that happened hundreds of years ago. When a person is reading, say a naive person like me, who has no opinion, I'm a blank slate right now. I'm in fourth standard, I'm just interested in history. It happens to be that I'm learning in Maharashtra in state board in Marathi medium school, and my teacher speaks very vocally about Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, and I'm interested. But all the material that I find on the internet, all the material that has been published outside of India, does not glorify him in the same way as my teacher is. So my conflict begins as a child. Who should I believe? Should I believe the teacher who is in front of me? Should I believe the written text which has been published thousands and multiples of thousands of times, which has reviews? This is where the confusion for a child begins. How do you think a child, or more importantly, a parent, should address it?
Great questions. So first of all, let's talk about the oral history thing. So there is this belief, very persistent, deep-rooted belief that we are an oral civilization, that everything was passed down orally. We know certain historical events that really did happen. 1,000 years ago, the Turks invaded India, and they took whatever knowledge from our universities they found worthwhile, like mathematics, astronomy, pharmacology, toxicology, all that stuff. And then they burned down all the libraries. It is known that the University of Nalanda, the library over there, burned for several months. If we were an oral civilization, how did we have so many books that burned for so many months? So we had written records of our wisdom, of our knowledge, of our historical records of our past. When the Greeks came to India, during the modern times, 2,500 years ago, they spoke about the fact, they have recorded the fact that the Indians had a calendar system that dated back to 6,600 something BC. Imagine how long we have been keeping records, but then it was all destroyed 1,000 years ago. So what happened is that all the written records of our past were burned down. Then the Europeans came to India. They said that you guys don't have any written records of your past. You people are in a historical civilization. So now we will write your history, and that's what you have to learn. And that's where it all went wrong. And now we are being taught that history that has been written from the European colonizers' perspective. So that is number one. We are not an ahistorical civilization. We used to have records of our past. We obviously did prioritize memorization of certain texts because you had to do the uchcharan properly, the pronunciation properly. That's why you had to memorize things. When you write something, you cannot write the exact pronunciation exactly with the proper nuances. So that's why when it comes to the Vedas and all that, you had to memorize it orally. So that's why we had that. But we also had written records. So that's the thing about the oral aspect and the written aspect of our history. Now you raised a very good point. You have a kid in 4th standard. The teacher tells that kid that Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was one of the greatest kings of all time of our civilization. But when you go online or you go and read the textbook, there's a whole different portrayal. So what is the truth? The problem is that we are not taught how to think, we are taught what to think. So we look up, we then are left clutching at straws and looking for people's opinions. The solution is look at the facts. Okay? So let's say somebody says Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was this or that. Forget what people are saying. Look at the facts, the accounts of what he has done. Ignore the words, focus on the actions. I think everybody will have the same account of the actions, but they will give different opinions of what the motivations were and what is the amount of greatness and all that. That doesn't matter. When I did this video about Genghis Khan, the thing is that Genghis Khan did not leave behind a written record of his past. He did not leave behind a memoir. And most of the accounts and records of him are written by his enemies, the people he conquered. And there is something called the secret history of the Mongols. But from these sources, you can actually create a timeline of what he did, what actions he did. And then based on the actions only, you can try and reverse engineer the psychology and why he did certain things. So the thing is, you have to only focus on the actions and ignore people's opinions. Most of the history textbooks, they are all about opinions, and they are less about facts. If you want to examine a historical figure, you should only focus on the actions. What actions did Julius Caesar do? What actions did Alexander do? We have this entire hagiography that's constructed around Alexander, but there are only 3 actual sources from which all these stories are constructed. And these sources, these 3 writers who wrote about Alexander, they lived decades after he died. So we have to look at these facts. So it's all about looking at the hard evidence. Even if something happened 2000 years ago, we will not be able to go and ask the person what happened, but there are records of the actions. So look at the actions and then try to reconstruct things from that. Ignore people's opinions. Most historians, they are very opinionated, and half the history textbooks are filled with opinions and judgments as to how great or how bad so-and-so person was. Forget that. Just look at the actions and see the consequences of the actions. For instance, if they say so-and-so person was great, ask yourself what actions did they take, and
Correct.
what were the consequences of these actions.
Correct.
For instance, let's talk about Mr. Nehru or Mr. Gandhi. We know what things they did. We know what actions they did. And we also know what were the consequences of those actions. Based on that, we can form our own opinions, based on the outcome of those actions. So I think that's how kids should be taught to approach it. It's not easy to do it. It's very hard to teach somebody how to think instead of just telling them what to think. But that's where the education system needs to be fixed.
So I had a question. We've had many different civilizations over the past. Which, as per you, which civilization do you think was most significant in your opinion?
Mine,
In my
me. Look, the oldest one that we know of is our civilization, Indian civilization. That's, I think, more or less an undisputed fact, because our archaeological record goes back at least 10,000 years. Our genetic record goes back 70,000 years. The oldest non-African male lineages, genetic lineages, are Indian, haplogroup F it's called, and the oldest non-African female lineages are also Indian, haplogroups M and N. So the genetic history of India is 70,000 years old. The archaeological record with unbroken cultural continuity is 10,000 years old. And we have not even scratched the surface of our archaeology. 95% of the archaeology is not done. So there's a whole lot out there. I think the most significant civilization is India. And the other reason for that is that if you look at the extent of, let's say, the Saraswati Sindhu phase of our history, which is the oldest phase actually. If you look at the geographical spread of it, it is greater than Egypt and Mesopotamia put together. You take Egypt, the geographical area, you take Mesopotamia, the geographical area, the Saraswati Sindhu area is much bigger than the two of them put together. So it was enormous, it was the oldest, and it was the most technologically advanced, and culturally also it looks like it was very advanced. You had these cities laid out in grid structures, and you have no palaces there. There is no seat of government, there are no palaces, there's no evidence of anybody ruling, and yet it looks like it was a democracy. So that's what it looks like. Obviously, it's like we say, circumstantial evidence. So clearly, Indian civilization, in my opinion, it's the most significant, oldest one. The other ones that we can speak about are the Mesopotamian civilization, Babylonia, you had Greece, you had Egypt, you had Rome. You had all these civilizations. The Roman history is also interesting. Rome is not a civilization; it's an empire actually.
It's an empire. That's true.
It's a different thing. And you had two phases of the Roman Empire: the eastern and the western one. The eastern one outlasted the western Roman Empire. You also had the Nordic Teutonic culture, the Vikings, and you had the Mesoamerican civilizations, which very little is known about them because they were all destroyed about 500 years ago. And Africa was home to wonderful culture and civilizations, but it's all been totally wiped out. So we don't quite know what was out there. So from whatever evidence we have, from my perspective, I clearly am biased for sure. I don't deny it, but I think our civilization is the oldest and the richest. That's how I see it.
Okay. Let's talk about, we are talking about old civilizations. So in your opinion, again, how old do you think is India?
Okay, what is India is the question. What is India? First, when we ask ourselves, how old is India? Do we mean the geography? Do we mean the culture? Do we mean the civilization? So the geography has been around for millions of years. India was once part of the African landmass, and because of plate tectonics, it detached along with Madagascar from Africa, about 120 million years ago. It went across the Indian Ocean, it slammed into Eurasia, and that's how the Himalayas were created. So this happened about 20 million years ago, the slamming and all that, between 50 and 20 million years ago. And we had dinosaurs in India, we had volcanism, the Deccan traps, all that. So very interesting geography, very interesting geological history. But when it comes to civilizationally, how old is India? We're talking about India as a civilization, as a culture. So that would come from the archaeological record of our culture. So what is our culture? Some of the most visible aspects of our culture are the mang mein sindoor of ladies, the vermilion that you put in, the bangles that ladies wear, the kind of dress, the saris that ladies wear, the folk tales that are passed on, like the parable of the thirsty crow who goes and puts those pebbles in the pot and all that. Then you have the Trishul symbol, the swastika symbol, the Shivalinga, things like that. These are all aspects of Indian culture, unmistakable aspects of Indian culture. And if you look at the archaeological evidence of how back deep in time you find it, it goes back nearly 10,000 years. So that tells you how old our cultural continuity is. It is claimed that Hinduism and Sanskrit are foreign to India, which means all these things, the Shivalinga, the Trishul, the swastika, all these things, they came from outside of India. But you find them deep in antiquity in the Saraswati Sindhu area, in the region, right? So it's clearly something that was integral to our geography, and it sprang out of the soil of India. So if we look at how old India is from the archaeological record, it goes back nearly 10,000 years.
Okay. Then right now, when we are saying India at 75, do you think we ourselves are sort of propagating the wrong ideas that when we are referring to India at 75, you see, again, I'm talking about my personal opinion, that I don't think any nation like India can have a father of nation.
Yeah.
Because when you are naming somebody a father of the nation, you can have respect for that person, but you cannot call him a father of the nation. When you do that, you are sort of also stating that the nation did not exist before that person, because that's how we think, that father comes, then the child comes. So don't you think that it is time where we propagate that India had an existence before its independence? Just the way recently we were in Singapore. Again, I'm going to ask a very long question, but let me just set the tone. So when we were in Singapore, the people in Singapore consider the Japanese occupation as their years, I mean during the Second World War, when they were not independent. Again, Singapore by itself, they were a British colony.
They were a
And
British
then
colony.
for a very brief period of time, they were colonized by the
about 10 years odd during
Japanese.
the war.
Japanese, a few years.
They were colonized by the Japanese, and for them, they consider that part as the,
what we consider as
Occupation.
colonization or
Yeah.
occupation. So that's what they consider. But they will always talk about Singapore as not a few-year-old country. They will talk about the culture. They will talk about the civilization. They will always start talking about Singapore since it was conceived by the British when it was a small island. But when we talk about India, a lot of times, even in our history books, we start from independence. Don't you think we are undermining our own power, our own history, and sort of erasing everything that happened before it?
Absolutely, absolutely. India was not born in 1947. What happened is this: India is actually a civilization state, but it was truncated in 1947, and a nation state was created out of a civilization. So 1947 was the beginning of the nation state of India. But the civilization state of India is more than 10,000 years old. So we have to look at it that way. The nation state is a truncated and, you would say, distorted form of what India actually is. So we have to aspire to regain the civilization state status. And we are slowly moving in that direction. So when it comes to the father of the nation, nobody can be the father of the nation. This nation is so old that we don't even know who the great people of the past were. Some of the people we can think of are obviously Lord Ram, Lord Krishna, and Emperor Bharat, and various other people. They were far greater than anybody who we would call today the so-called father of the nation. So I completely disagree about this nomenclature or this title being given to anybody. There are far greater people than him who have lived and who have been born in the soil of India. So India was not born in 1947. Lots of people try to portray it that way, that India is 75 or whatever years old. Come on. India is at least 10,000 years old. So these are things that kind of are like brainwashing or propaganda. And this is done via the education system, by our teachers, by the textbooks, and the media, and the entertainment industry also. So that's why it is so it permeates the entire environment that we live in. And that's why kids grow up thinking that that India was born in 1947, which is clearly not the case.
We all know that this happens, all right. A lot of people say that the idea of India did not exist before the British. The British gave us India. The British gave us the railways and everything like that. So I know that they say it. My question is, why do you think they say it? What is there to gain for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. What do they stand to gain by doing this? Look, what's the point of mentally colonizing a people? What's the point of making them mentally colonize and make them lose their self-confidence and all that? That means that you can own them. You can tell them what to do. You can tell them what is right. You can tell them what is wrong. If you break down the family system, you can make them all isolated, and you can sell them whatever you want. Sell them whatever you want to sell them. So it's about brainwashing people. It's about destroying the self-confidence that a nation has. And by doing that, you can reduce the nation to a market. India has a population of 1.4 billion. It's an enormous market. But if we have some self-confidence, some pride, then we will want to grow larger. And instead of consuming, we want to produce and export to the world. But if you have no such self-belief, then you will essentially look at everybody else as greater than you, and you will do whatever they tell you. So the entire education system was set up for this purpose. The education system we today have is a continuation of the 19th century education system that Lord Macaulay instituted in India. We had our own education system that they destroyed. And they made it compulsory to study in English if you want to get a government job. And jobs were scarce, so people had to get into that. So the education system that we have is designed, it was originally designed to churn out clerks and peons. It is not designed to produce thought leaders and leaders and confident young adults. The kids who come out of the education system are all clueless. They are all confused. So that is by design. So the entire point of the education system is to confuse people, make them clueless, and make them mentally colonized and self-loathing and deracinated from the culture. I think we are the only nation where we don't teach our own culture in the education system. Every other nation has this, but we don't teach our own culture. So these are the problems that exist. And the point is to make India, mentally colonized.
So I think one of the reasons probably they don't teach Indian culture is because they can't really put, a time limit on from when do you start teaching it. Do you start teaching Indian culture from, say, Chandragupta Maurya's time? Because if you start teaching the culture from that time, you inevitably have to talk about the invasions that happened across India, the things that were destroyed, the loot, the arson that happened, the murders that happened, and all of that stuff. And maybe people are just trying to skirt away from that whole topic. And every time we're talking about, whenever we talk in social media about the invasions that happened, or about talking about Indian kings and Indic culture, we always get told that happened a really long time ago. You should stop bringing it up again and again and again. So what do you think about that? Do you think that, why do you think we should talk about the invasions that happened as an event that happened, rather than looking at, any of the inevitable religious aspects that come to it, like from a historical perspective?
See, when a person is suffering from trauma, they typically have to go to a psychologist. And those people are made to relieve the trauma in a certain way. And that process heals you, and heals you over time. India as a nation, as a society, we are suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as amnesia. So we don't know what happened to us, but we are suffering from the trauma. We don't know what happened because we are not taught what happened. If we are all taught you have to face the past. You have to confront the past together as a society, not as different divisions of sub-national identities. It happened to all of us, all of our ancestors. The past 1,000 years were a traumatic millennium, the millennium of humiliation. The Chinese speak about the century of humiliation. They make it a point to teach their kids what happened. And that's how they're able to go past it. Yeah. The Israelis make sure that their kids are taught what happened in the Holocaust. For us, we brush it under the carpet and we are not told. We don't talk about these things. We never mention it. And that's why people, they will go on making the same mistake over and over again, because you're not able to learn the lessons of the past. The past may be terrible, but it's not the people who live today who are responsible for what happened then. We have to be taught the past. We have to speak about it and we have to confront it. Only then will we be able to move past it as a nation. Right now, we are not moving past what happened. Right now, as a nation, we are still stuck there. And we are still doing the same thing over and over again. And the same fights are happening over and over again. It's being amplified by social media, by entertainment, and news media, all that. So unless we confront what happened, unless we find a way of speaking openly about it, and then moving on, unless that happens, we're going to be stuck here forever.
Brings a very interesting point to my head. So we often blame social media that it is only showing us the thing that we agree with. In the US, if you go on Facebook, then if you are, say, a Republican supporter, you will only see media or only see posts that are pro-Republican.
Yeah.
If you are a Democrat, then you will see more Democrat stuff. So don't you think India has been doing it with its people through education for a really long time? Because we don't have a uniform education system. I mean, I come from, I stay in Mumbai, born and brought up over here. I studied in a Marathi medium vernacular school. So my exposure was in a certain way that my school knew that these are going to be Marathi people. These people are naturally going to be inclined towards Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. And that's why the story needs to be told from a certain perspective. But what happens is, outside the comfort of my school, I interact with people who come from all sorts of social backgrounds. They may not go to the same school as I do. And that is where the conflict arises. Their story, the stories that they listen to, might be completely contradictory to what I have learned as subjective truth. And that is where the conflict begins. That if in the future I am to have an argument with somebody, because I am so hardwired, or say he is so hardwired to think about certain characters from our history in certain fashion, he will not be receptive to something which is a very novel idea. For him, the guerrilla warfare by Shivaji Maharaj would just be like he will call Shivaji Maharaj a dacoit. Like he will call him, like, he's not a king, he's just a, say, what do you call a daku? Something like that. And it will be very offensive for me. So don't you think this brushing under the carpet has created more problems than trying to solve something?
Absolutely. It has created so many problems. It has created so many divisions, unnatural, artificial divisions within the nation. In every nation, there is a national story. There is a certain story, a certain narrative, which may be right or may be wrong, but it's been created and everybody is taught that. In India, we are all taught different narratives. It's like we are all given an AI, which understands our psychology and then tells us only what we like. It's like that in every part of India. Everybody is taught a different story, and every house has a different story. Every let's say religion has a different story, and that's how it is. So there are so many internal divisions that have been created artificially within India. There is no actual story of India as a whole, as a culture, as a civilization, and that's what creates all the problems. And lots of things have been hidden away. Lots of lies are taught and written in the history textbooks. So that's what. Once you have this situation, it's like it's a tinderbox. Everybody is gonna be at each other's throat, and you talk to each other. It's like you're talking in different languages. Whatever you're taught as a child, it stays with you. You are emotionally attached to that. And when you hear something different, it's very strong cognitive dissonance. And your first reaction is emotional. No, I'm not going to listen to you. I don't agree with you. That's it. That is so easy to create once you get hold of a child when the child is young and you teach certain things. So that's what you do. You take 5 different sets of children, teach them all different things, antagonistic things, and let them grow up and then watch the fun. That's how it is in India.
Okay, I'm going to ask you something based on what you just said. Can you tell me a few untruths that are being taught to us and a few things that have been hidden from our history?
One of the biggest untruths that we have been taught is that Hinduism and Sanskrit are foreign to India. That they've been brought into India through white-skinned invaders. And all of us have a little bit of that white blood. So we all have some sin, some original sin within us. And our ancestors were evil, they were brutal. The so-called Aryans, they were invaders, they were oppressive, they were casteist, they were misogynistic, they were backward, they were patriarchal, everything you can imagine. All the bad qualities, they had it. And of course, they came with Hinduism and Sanskrit. So Hinduism is foreign to India. Sanskrit is foreign to India. If you have Hinduism in India, then why can't you have other religions that also came in through force? That's the kind of thing that's been done. Okay. So that is one of the biggest untruths that has been perpetrated upon the people of India. This Aryan invasion thing. And then it became a migration theory. Then it will become a tourism theory. Then it will become a picnic theory. Because the evidence never adds up. But they're going to keep on pushing it. So that's one of the first example of a huge untruth that I can think of. What has been hidden away? The past 1,000 years, everything has been hidden away. The Turks started invading India about 1200 years ago. It took them about half a millennium to make proper inroads into India. India did not fall overnight. Persia fell overnight. Persia was a great kingdom, a great empire. They fell overnight, essentially. India did not fall for 500 years. And even after 1,000 years, India was still resisting. But we are not taught this. We are not taught about the resistance. We are not taught how brutal the invaders and occupiers of India, the Turks, were. We are not taught that. We are taught that they were all great people. Then they contributed so much to Indian culture and all that. The Indian population fell by 80 million in 500 years. We had a significant birth rate, and yet our population overall fell by 80 million. So the actual death toll must have been close to 500 million in 500 years. That's the math that people can't really make in their head. That's what happened. Imagine killing 500 million people in, let's say, 1,000 years. That's it. That's the worst genocide in human history. And these Turks, they have themselves written about this. Look at their records. They have glorified this thing. We killed so many people. We created mountains of heads and whatnot. Why are we not taught this history? They destroyed all our libraries, all our universities. We had great universities all across India. Nalanda, Takshashila, Tilhara, Vikramashila, Udantapuri, Somapur, Sharda Peeth, so many. Which is there? Which one is there today? They have all been flattened. Just imagine how much knowledge we lost. All the scholars, teachers, gurus were all killed, beheaded. None of this is taught to us. Why are there no great temples in northern India? What happened to them? We only have ruins. How did that happen? Look at how many statues of Buddha we have today, which has the head on the shoulders. Nothing. How does this happen? Why is this not taught? There are so many things that we are not taught about. And unless we confront these truths, we're not going to move past where we are as a nation. So at some point in time, somebody will have to make this happen.
What would you like to change in our education system?
The first thing I would like to change is stop teaching kids what to think and teach them critical thinking. How to think. How to tell what is right and what is wrong. How to discern real news from fake news. That's what you have to learn. See, in education, you need very simple things. Everybody needs to know arithmetic. 2 plus 2 equal to 4. Multiplication, division, subtraction, addition. That stuff. You don't need to learn algebra, trigonometry, and calculus. Nobody uses that in real life. But we are taught all that. What a waste of time. I love advanced mathematics, but I am telling you myself, you don't need that. Okay. So one thing you need is arithmetic. Be good at arithmetic. The second thing is learn how to communicate. We are not taught how to communicate. We are taught how to write, but interacting with people, communicating, exchanging views, communicating effectively, we are not taught this. We are not taught financial literacy. By the time you come out of your master's degree or whatever, you are clueless financially. Typically, that's what happens. That's what needs to change. And most importantly, critical thinking. How to think, not what to think. That's what needs to change. And you know what? You don't need to study until you're 24 or whatever. I think by the time you're 15, 16, you're ready to go out into the job market as an apprentice or something. Most people don't even need bachelor's degrees and master's degrees. Most people want to go and start a job. They want to start earning. So after the 12th standard exam you're done, maybe whatever aptitude you have, you can go and do a 1-year diploma or something and then go and start a job. That's how it should be actually. I think 90% of kids, if you give them the opportunity, will go and do that. There's so much you can change, but it's fundamental changes.
But you know, it's like, if you, the way it's perceived, it's like you can do a master's, you go and do your bachelor's, you go and do a master's. If you're doing a diploma, it means you're really not like a bright student, but then you still want to do something, so then theek hai, you kar le, diploma kar le.
It's like low status if you have diploma, yeah.
So the people who do diploma are the people who could not get into a degree.
That's how it is perceived today. That needs to change. The entire system has to change, you know.
Thank you so much for watching this conversation. Tell us how we can improve. We have an email ID dedicated so that you can give us feedback. If you have any suggestions in terms of which guests we can have next, tell us over there. Thank you so much for watching, क्योंकि आपके support से हमें फर्क पड़ता है.